I am collecting all my books together to put in boxes and leave behind for when I will leave this country. And I will go through them a little bit, and you might find something interesting, some not. To read yourself, look into, who knows. I start with my dancing book collections from Pierre Rameau, the dancing master. This is how the few writers started ballroom dancing in France. It's good to improve your demeanor, or just to be interested in the history of it. Dancing, artistic and social, more about English dances. Classical ballet. This is an interesting book about the development of ballet, how it started, how the actors started from male to female, how it became accepted that females became actresses. And classical ballet technique. These books are about geopolitics, Serbia and the West. This is the return of war to Chechnya. Interviews the reporter. She travels to Caucasus and she meets a lot of people and writes about how people see each other, the involvement of Russia in the war, and yeah, politics. Let's see. This book I translated for a part in English because it's not available in English. A favorite part of mine. You can find it on Script. Louis Couperus, very good writer in Dutch. Book of Dante Alighieri, which is about his poems himself, what he wrote. He explains what he means with it and interesting. The Divine Comedy, familiar with it, I guess. She's my favorite poetess, Edith Södergran. She wrote originally in Swedish, but she grew up among Finnish language, Russian language, Swedish language. This is Cold Night Lullaby of Colin McKay. He committed suicide in the 80s, I think. He wrote multiple books. He went as a humanist to the Balkan to provide humanitarian aid. He fell in love, and when he wanted to get her and the child out of there, the next day she was murdered in cold blood. The poems. Wisława Szymborska, Polish poetess, very beautiful. I can recommend it. Heinrich Heine, also one of my favorite poets. I have 2 books of him. This is about the stories of him, written by him. And these are the actual poems, a lot of them collected. My favorite one is Tannhauser. Another one of Edith Södergran. Bhagavad Gita from the Indian literature. Persian poems. There's a beautiful poem from about Alexander the Great in it. Rumi, Mahmoud Darwish, about the siege, it says the title. It's a beautiful poems he has in it, nothing too religious. He also mentions, for example, Olympus and the gods, so it's more liberal. Lao Tzu, my father bought it when I was a child. I forgot most of it, what's in it. But another book of Rumi. La Rochefoucauld, Maxims. I really recommend this, it's very interesting. about human nature, about the hypocrisy of having mercy, for example, of certain kind of love, and how mercy is often just a weakness, how it is, how you're afraid to act upon slaying the enemy because you're afraid you might be captured soon enough yourself, and so you want mercy yourself. So the hypocrisy of it is nothing but love. Carving wood, ornaments. I have some tools to work with. Still have to work with them actually. Love spoons, above this in Wales, Welsh talk, Welsh songs. In Swansea I bought them. And it's interesting how they used to be at home, the boys, the lads, and they made these kind of spoons for the ones they love, and they give them to the girl, and if she accepted, then possible marriage. And today, the modern man go to McDonald's, take them out, and the women don't know any better anyway. So like attracts like in regards of the degeneracy of the minds. So there's a contrast, you know, how detailed they worked on it, and now McDonald's, fuck that. There's no progress. Book about math. I wish to learn it a little bit, but it's not my thing, really. One of the reasons I just don't like school. Erasmus, there's some things in it, not for my much. Medieval music, I'm interested in Gregorian music. A friend of me, former friend of me, taught me some Gregorian, how to sing it and respond to it. In regards to priests sing it, and you have to sing back, pray back, though I'm not religious. Seneca, the dialogues. It's more about controlling your emotions, how useless it is, for example, to lead your emotions, and it's better to use emotions as mimicking it, to lead the people, than to be led by the emotions itself. Because the one is you still have a clear mind and you will move the hearts and minds of the people. The other one you will move yourself and people will laugh at you. Darwin's dating show about sexual selection of birds, which can also apply for humans. Natural selection and sexual selection. Though sexual selection often is a trait of health as well. So, but I have to explain it or think about it more. Some Islamic, one little Quran, Shia Hadith, prayer book of a certain sect, and a bigger Quran. A Muslim gave it to me, Dutch convert. So now some books I'm actually reading. Minima Moralia of Adorno, Frankfurt Scholar. There's some nice things in it, also some less so nice things. Compendium of Gilles Deleuze. He's very abstract in his writing in most of his books, or just the ones I've read so far, or still reading in. So, kind of dictionary is welcomed, yes. It is interesting, really, that each word has so much substance in it, and is connected often to reality and in philosophical context to history of meaning. So you really have to understand what a person is saying. The Mabinogion, Celtic stories, already transferred more than 1,000 years ago, maybe 2,000 years ago, and eventually 1,000 years ago it was written down in these stories. I really like them. You can learn a lot about the psychology of these people back then and European consciousness in general, about honor and about beyond the morality of today. Friedrich Nietzsche, The Morning Dawn, still reading it. I'm not a very good reader, I'm not very focused in it. So I read this book and then that book and then this book and then that book, all in an hour. so don't go through much pages of each book. Rage in Time of Sloterdijk. And many of the books I bought really some time ago. This one above in Wales as well. Oh no, in London I mean. Shakespeare, Midsummer Night's Dream. I like his style, pagan and beautiful. Beyond Good and Evil of Friedrich Nietzsche. I'm sure you're familiar with it. And let's see, The Critic of the Cynical Reason by Peter Sloterdijk. It's an interesting book. I can recommend it. It's about psychology of different kinds of types of humans, about cynicism, mechanicism, difference, and about certain psychological, about how soldiers are trained, for example, to become schizophrenic, how the actual heroes are put in safety, the officers, while they don't want it themselves, but due to technological improvement, progress, whatever you want to call it. The cowards have to be trained into heroes, and the heroes have to try to keep self-control to not go into battle. And more books I'm reading in. I read 25 pages today of the Iliad, above this one in London. This book is very, very, very abstract for me. De verschil en herhaling, difference and repeat. But it's about eternal return as well. It builds upon Nietzsche and it has its own substance. And it's actually interesting, but I don't understand that much about it. So there's certain sentences I take and I remember them, and I might build something out of it myself with other substance, my other thoughts, or other substances of books I've read. But he says also himself, Deleuze, to read a book not to be restricted by their thinking, but to wander in it and to create your own thinking. But of course it should be in touch with reality, biology, not to be a coward. Lucretius, a very interesting book, more than 2000 years ago written. This is the only book that is left over by him. The Poem of Nature, about nature. It's more or less the ancient view on atoms, how atoms work. He says atoms are like, that we're all made of atoms, and it's like ink. And from ink you can make letters, and from this specific amount of letters you can make sentences. And just as the diversity of sentences and words and vowels, you have the diversity in life, in substances, in organisms, in lifeless objects, etc. And also about how the spirit manifests itself in the body. And it is really scientific, and it doesn't use the word genetics, but you can say he would use it in a modern context. Gilles Deleuze, yes. Anti-Oedipus. This one was also abstract, but once you read through it, it becomes less abstract. You will learn by it yourself, by progressing in this book. So you don't really need that much the companion. About the fluxes, about schizophrenia in the modern context. About breaking through the triangle of the Oedipus complex, father, mother, children. I can recommend it. I'm rereading this for the third time, I think. Ecce Homo, the new human, I think. And it's really interesting of Friedrich Nietzsche. Beautiful prosaic thoughts written by him. The psychology of Marquis de Sade by different philosophers who wrote about him. It's collected by a Dutch or Belgian writer, I think. I don't know if it's available in English, but it's really interesting about the language itself by Marquis de Sade, how language normally makes you forget about the materialistic essence of language and makes you imagine, but how Marquis de Sade destroys the livelihood of language. And also about how nature feeds upon the death, that the destruction of living organisms is the creativity of nature to create new life forms, that what's this life based upon, and that if you let live too much, life will degenerate. I can agree to a certain extent about it. Also, it should be my dance collection. Philosophical book written by a Canadian about dance, history of dance and repetition and the meaning of dance. It's really interesting in a certain way. A new point of view. Sloterdijk's Veers. I think I have the book more than 1.5 years right now, but I'm a difficult reader with focus. It is really, really interesting. I really recommend to read this. It's part 1 and 2 in the Dutch version. And it's about European history, psychology, about how the spheres are developed through religion, ideological views, and how we looked upon the laws 1,000 years ago, how they change, and how there's an effect upon how we live, and how we look upon history in the future, and just about art, and it's really diverse. I can really recommend it. Shakespeare, I've bought this in London as well, also I'm reading in it. Not a full collection. This one is really interesting, by Elias Norbert, The Civilizing Process. It's about, he gathers a lot of men poems, and he did research in it in French, German, English, and some other countries, and how civilization is progressed, how it's not, how we look upon it upon the manners 1,000 years ago, is we judge them as barbaric, but really, what is this progress? Everything started with little details, little developments. 1,000 years ago, the fork was not even in use. So imagine how we ate back then. More with the hands, yes, but it was acceptable. And this manners also have an effect upon how you interact with each other at the table, but also in society. They used to be less dirty from each other back then, but now we're much more dirty from each other. More individual in the sense that you don't want to touch each other. And about the differences in the aristocracy, and I can really recommend this book, Civilizing Process. Alchemy and Mystic. It speaks for itself, I think. This book I was given by my neighbor on the other side of the street. She gave me this book after I told her what certain paintings are about, to my interpretation of the great painter Hieronymus Bosch. The fact that most people can't even in detail make such paintings by themselves without the modern techniques, also it goes for architecture a lot. That there's no progress, that we're actually regressing in intellect. Nature doesn't care. Hebrew, when I was in Israel, Hebrew phrase book, Georgian dictionary. This book is about certain rules in the Dutch language and poetry, and Arabic dictionary. Okay. This one is Miguel Serrano. I can recommend him as well. The book's a little bit damaged because I take often of my books with me in travels and to work. If you're familiar with certain ideals, you're also familiar with his name. or his writings himself. Very prosaic, very beautiful, about the ancient myths. The Return of the Myth. Not a book, but it's a CD for practicing yoik. It's a Sami expression of music, which you can do freely. You can look it up on YouTube. It's very interesting, a very beautiful kind of musical and emotional expression. So about this to possibly develop my understanding. This book I really loved when I was a child. I searched on the internet, but I couldn't find any other Dutch or English translation of it. About the Vikings and how they traveled, and it's a roman, so not historically. And how they came in the Islamic world, and how they have to adapt, and how they came back, and treasure, etc. The Edda, Dutch version. My father has a better edition from his childhood. Asgard. My father always took the Edda with him when he was a young man to go cycling and to explore Europa. That's how I met my mother. My mother went from Newport in Belgium, cycling, to Sweden, to her family. My father went from Eindhoven in the Netherlands, southern Netherlands, to the North Cape in the most northern point of Scandinavia, just as a goal in itself, to prove himself. And along the way they met each other from two different countries but spoke the same language, multiple languages actually. And so they become mother and father. And some Christian, religious, Catholic poetry, 7th centuries in the Netherlands. Interesting how they looked upon society back then. Then in that book also the Jews are referred as black bugs, a certain kind of bug, and I forgot the name, as angry mob. Very different mindset than we have now. The authentic reactionary. I can recommend the book. It is Catholic, yes, but it is interesting to read. Sort of kind of maxims. Fools make themselves only angry about the consequences. Never about the causality, never about what they have done. So I can recommend it. Jesus in the Talmud by Schaffer. Pilgrim book story. It is maybe nice to read about psychology, but the ending is more like it's virtuous to be in the paradise of God and to worship Him all the time and different layers of hierarchical layers. Well, I want to worship a God. Christian art. Here, beautiful icons in it. I can't open it right now. And the meaning of these little icons, or bigger icons, if they're repainted, just copies. The other ones more beautiful ones. And the other one is the same, more or less. So it's more beautiful. The witch hammer of Henrik is Incitoris, and Jacob is Spengler, but he's just used as a way to be read, so use his name. It's through this book a lot of witches were burned, so-called witches. It's actually an interesting book besides the psychology back then about these people. Also, it's about instinct as well and about psychology of certain people. There's some interesting things in it actually. I can recommend it to read, yes. He's a woman hater as well, but he also praises women in certain virtues, but he's a woman hater in this sense. The Age Without a Father. It has to do with God as well, but egalitarianism, Catholic, Augustinus. Let's see. This book I can recommend. I don't remember what it is about, but I can recommend it because I liked it. About the destruction of the church in the Netherlands, the effects of it, how it suddenly collapsed, and the Catholics, from one point to another, chose socialism and communism above Catholicism. So the way they chose socialism and communism, you can see that they already were by heart this kind of egalitarian minded. So it's not really much a change in ideology, but a change in name of the ideology. They were already egalitarian. Rosa Campus, can don't recommend it, I don't like him really. This book I recommend because it's about the crusade, first crusade, about the witnesses and European psychology on how they saw modern French psychology and how they saw foreigners or non-Christians, especially non-Europeans. How he emphasizes how we will go to war, the West versus the East, and he also takes note of Alexander the Great, how he destroyed the East and conquered the East. So it is really interesting to read how back then already there was this identity of European consciousness about the West versus the East, about conquering each other. Though the Persians, of course, and the Middle Eastern peoples back then were also less affected during the age of Alexander the Great by other genetic inputs, such as the Mongols and the Mongols and other kinds of people. Creation. Dutch war battle songs, not really battle songs actually, more about an honor to God and poems written during the time of the 80 years of revolt against Spain. Letters to Hitler. And above this magazine, because of the photos, I like them. In Poland, it has some beautiful photos in them, pictures. Though I cannot read what is said. Now this book I found in the garbage. I worked few years as a garbage man, and here the garbage is recycled, so it's just clean to get into the garbage can and look among the paper and the commercial magazines to find some books in it, so I won't be dirty from it. Besides, I was already dirty from the other kind of job. It's interesting about the aphorisms. He was from Belgium, but he wrote about the Dutch psychology as well, how we are so egalitarian, or we, not me, the average Dutch, and how they want to mow everything to equal height. And you can really sense this as well in the Dutch psychology. If you put your head above the others, then they don't like it. But in certain manners, it is nice because the way you dress, they don't care about it. When you go to a restaurant, they just go in average clothing, and even the rich people wear just sneakers. So that's a little bit socialistic by heart. Also found this in the garbage. These two books I got by some Polish Jew from a hostel. He just gave them to me, put them in my hands, shake my hand, and went out. I didn't know why back then. Someone told me, he pointed to my towel, and it was hanging on my bed in the hostel, to dry it, but he used it apparently to mop the floor and to a lot of chemicals were in it. Yes, thank you. I can't read them. Also found in the garbage. My work as a garbage man about the popes and the history of popedom from Petrus to Benedictus the 16th. I don't know what this book is about. I just looked into it one time more than 2 years ago and just looked at me. Still have to read a little bit, but I don't have time about that. And rewritten Odysseus in a more Roman form, style. I think the actual Odysseus will be better to read, so. Alone on the World, one of my favorite books, next to some books of Thea Beckman, about a little boy sold by his father and travels the world, loses companions, certain animals, and it's a very emotional story, beautiful story. Leo Tolstoy, War and Peace, thick book, very detailed in description how every person acts and looks like, and from even the hair on the above the upper lip, even that he will describe. And, Friedrich Nietzsche, Alles Sprach Zarathustra, a very beautiful book if you can understand him. If you can't, well, you're not developed enough, or you just are genetically incompatible to understand Friedrich Nietzsche. This book actually made me understand how to love against certain kind of people. Keep this joy. Be serious in certain regards, yes. Learn to say yes, but learn to say no as well. A certain yes is a certain no. As their yes to life is a yes to paradise, we don't say yes to paradise. Interesting book, but I'm not sure yet how much. It's a different subjects. Susan Sontag, some lesbian woman from America. She has some interesting things to say, but she's a little degenerate in certain regards because of the sexuality, I think. And her taste in certain movies, etc. But she has some interesting things to say, I have to admit. So I can still recommend her. Peter Sloterdijk, You Have to Change Your Life. As well, Peter Sloterdijk, if you're familiar with him. He writes about humans, psychology, identity. Identity is the right on laziness. I haven't read much in him yet, in this book. Cicero or Cicero, the ideal orator. Well, it was maybe in this book as well that I read about emotions, how to take control, but if it's your taste, read it, if not. Arthur Schopenhauer, I have to admit the title of this book was what attracted me back then, years ago, because it is politically incorrect in this way to say is geen vrouw die deugt, there's not a woman who has virtue, not one woman with virtue. But it's not just about the psychology and sexuality of the female, a lot more. Arthur Schopenhauer is recommendable. This book is Michel de Montaigne, my second book I bought when I started with philosophy. I can really recommend it. It's very interesting on the psychology and history of people and developments of certain European developments. Also, he lived in a time with a lot of warfare, political influences about people with honor neglecting the Christian ideal, and now the time shifted literally. I was from one day to another day in a different year because the time shifted to correct the date of time. Hence we are in 2015 now. The third part of Peter Sloterdijk, Schuim, Foam. This is also a really interesting book. I read segments of it sometimes, about atmospheric terrorism as well, about communicative terrorism, and how architecture represents the change in how we connect with each other. I don't think there's an English translation yet, but I can surely recommend it. Though I have to read much more in it myself. My first book, Lucius Flavius Arrianus, written by him, Alexander the Great. I was 10 years back then, and as a boy I was a very big fan of Alexander the Great. Wanted to know a lot about him. And it is a good thing that I forgot my interest back then, because I started at a point that I was reading mere facts about him, about the exact point, about his birth, about his death, the exact date, etc. And if you go too much into details, you will be lost into them, and you have to start to understand certain spirits, certain ideals. And if you at a young age go into too much details, it can poison your mind. The mind has to be open to develop the spirit, to understand it. That's why I was attracted in the first place to this man, about his ambition as a young man to conquer the world, or the then known world, from such a small place in Europe. And Balthazar Gracian, the Hand Oracle. Balthazar Gracian influenced as well great thinkers such as Friedrich Nietzsche, and he's very aristocratic in his way how he sees humans, and in a certain manner I can as well sense it in how Nietzsche puts it in words. They've, in this regards, the same spirit. So if a writer is influenced by another writer, it doesn't mean that he's copying them. It means that they understand the same spirit. It's very interesting. And Balthazar Gracian also writes about the fools, the dwarfs of humans, the mediocre man. Now only the great man will be ending into the paradise. And this paradise is not of God, but the paradise of for the philosophers, the conquerors, those who had self-control, those who did great deeds, even the destroyers, Achilles and Alexander the Great, great conquerors, and the killers of men. And that's how your name will not be forgotten. To be great, not mediocre, not a dwarf, like Nietzsche would say, like Balthazar Gracian would say. The life's artist. I actually forgot I bought this book once and I read it apparently as well. Probably a lot of segments are somewhere in my subconscious, in my mind, and create how I view the world right now, but I have to reread it again, because I have the feeling I'm much more understandable right now, that I can comprehend a lot more at the point where I am now. My memory has broadened. I can take in much more substance and understand it much better and connect it to my own thoughts and the thoughts of others to make my own worldview, and it's good. But you should not read too much, because reading too much is... I go outside cycling a lot, running, sometimes to the gym, and just wandering around in my own mind. I'm not the biggest reader in regards to focus, but reading is healthy within your own limits. Everybody has limits. It has not to become a disease, that you become weakened by it, but it should strengthen you. The Critic, or The Art of Living. This is the book. I started philosophy with this book without actual consideration. I was comparing this book with the Bible, with the Rembrandt paintings in it. And I was 17 years old back then, and I worked for a plane ticket to go to Israel, to work in a kibbutz, but I did some other things there. And I'm really glad I bought this book, because without this book, without his insights, without his greatness, how he sees people, it's very allegorical. And you read it symbolically and literally at the same time. And it's about the Hellenic mythology, interwoven a little bit with Christianity because of that time, of course. And he as well was pressured by the church to write within certain limits. So one chapter is maybe a little bit too Christian, just one chapter actually, to make the church happy about it. It is really a great book, a great mind. And I will someday, I've promised myself and him, to go visit his grave and see what I can do. Maybe say some words, maybe do some good things around his grave, depending what the state of this grave is. I have to see, just the connectivity, honoring a person who opened your mind so much, Balthazar Gracian. But the English don't really appreciate this book so far. There are not really translations in English in it. Only the maxims are translated of Balthazar Gracian into English. And I found this book only online. It's not really a good translation online. And it does not notes. And the notes are very important. And some Christians go look into the Bible to get some inspiration from the book, from the Bible. And I do it with Balthazar Gracian sometimes, to just open a random place in the book and see what is to be read. And the little things next to it. Flattering, purity of the heart. I will do a special review one time about it. So, let's see. A book from my father. It's still open on this page because I wanted to read it, but I haven't done it yet. About the continuum of human needs and instinctive behavior, or about the values we can learn from primitive cultures. And this part is about how it is unhealthy, about how we become this much that the new generations, the younger generations, cannot look up anymore to the older generation, to the fathers and the mothers and the grandfathers and grandmothers. And once this is happening, there will become a very big gap between us in psychological processes, and anger, resentment, and rebelliousness maybe, and how we cannot understand how they have let come certain things so far regards with political processes such as multiculturalism in this case, in this century, and hedonism, and so we need to relearn certain values, such as Nietzsche said, and how the civilizing process of Elias Norbert explains, and how we go back to the ancients to learn from them. Also a book from my father about his village when he lived for a time in Germany when he was a child, 4 years old I think. Multicultural blood regards with European multiculturalism, so Swedish, Dutch, German, French, and Belgian, Flemish. But Flemish are already. What are the Flemish? Dutch, German, and French themselves. I've already done that, yes. This book I got from Icon Painting, the teacher. So the interesting on how colors are, what colors are, how you can make colors, the colors of history, how the peoples used to make colors themselves, and how we perceive colors, that everything is interactivity. Excuse me. and these colors. Everything is so self-evident, it seems. You just buy a t-shirt with yellow stripes on it, or some green-blue t-shirt, I don't know, the national flag. But the colors used to be made from natural resources, like certain stones, or certain animals, or flowers. Not flowers, but a certain kind of, I forgot. And there's also a way a woman taught me that how to make colors from onions, how to have a lot of onion peels, put them in a pan, however you call it, and cook them for 30 minutes. Put a hint of salt with it together, and then put them out. I forgot. It's a manipulation block. Anyway, De La Fontaine, 60 Fables. As a child, I loved this book. I think it's very important to learn to teach certain kind of morals or moral interpretations, not moral absolutes or Christian morals, but through stories and poems and prose to learn values, what is valuable, what's not valuable. Is courage more valuable than cowardice? It's no relative morality, not absolute morality. Absolute morality is derived from patterns, like why I don't really believe in morals, but because I don't believe in morality doesn't mean that I can be a child rapist. No, there's a biological mechanism which prevents me to be such a pervert. And from this biological mechanism, the average people judge upon it that it's morally justifiable to kill a child rapist, for example, because the average human is not attracted to children, and children are infertile, have no fertile traits, psychologically not developed enough, so we are not attracted to them. So, because I don't believe in morality, in absolute morality, doesn't mean that I will be a pervert, because this from biological mechanisms and averages derived morality, how we see it. The Homerus Ilias, the Iliad, also from my father, from his childhood, in Dutch. And the Odyssey, also old book of George Orwell, really recommendable because we live in 1984. And old Dutch rewritten book about certain Dutch expeditions and how they seafaring maps. This is an empire of or a city of the Lugano. When the Dutch described the cities and the empires and the kings and queens, it was not like on Western standards. This can be a misinterpretation for people today who say, they wrote about the kings and queens of Africa and the empires, but it's described next to the paintings and how the expeditioners themselves wrote about them, that they were from wood, the height of the wooden walls, or the matriarchy, patriarchy. They were no kings and queens in standards of European views, but they were acknowledged as such by these European explorers. So this also amounts for a certain amount of respect. So the prejudices today is different from back then. 400 years ago they would describe them as such with such words. But today we automatically will view king, queen, kingdom with a certain prejudiced imagination, like European settings, but there are some more primitive forms, if I can say so, in regards to racial makeup. And how they did trade, and what they did trade, and how they treated their slaves, and how they conquered each other, the tribes, and really a debunking about that we exploited the Africans, and it's all in it here about what they did, how much they trade, how they did business with the Africans, the Negroes. So that's it, my last book. I hope you might have found something interesting in it. Who knows?